Paul Weller, the mod father. He's a musical icon, known for his sharp suits and an even sharper tongue. For over 4 decades, he's been a giant of British music, a songwriter who defined one generation and inspired countless others, from the peak of Britpop to the artists of today. This is a man who has always moved forward, never content to become a nostalgia act. But there's another side to Weller's famous conviction. A side that is brutally honest, fiercely opinionated, and absolutely unforgiving. He's a man driven by a core belief in authenticity, a punk and mod attitude that has never faded. And if you fall on the wrong side of that attitude, he will not hesitate to let the world know. While he's inspired a whole generation of musicians, there are some he wouldn't hesitate to, well, let's just say he's not a fan. So today, we're revealing the 3 singers Paul Weller has publicly and brutally criticized the most. And the reasons behind these feuds are more personal and shocking than you might think. This isn't just about musical disagreements, it's about deep-seated cultural clashes, battles of ideology, and a refusal to compromise that has defined Weller's entire career. Get ready, because the mod father never, ever pulls his punches. First up is a guy who, on the surface, seems to share some common ground with Weller. Both came out of Britain's late 70s music scene, fronting 2 of the most successful bands of the whole era. But while Paul Weller was leading the jam, giving voice to a frustrated and angry generation of working-class youth, Gordon Sumner, better known as Sting, was fronting the Police, a band whose pop-rock sound achieved massive global success. That difference is the real heart of the conflict. In Weller's world, music is about grit, reality, and a connection to the streets. It's about having an edge. For him, the Police, and later Sting's solo career, represented something else entirely, a polished, professional, and maybe too perfect version of rock that lacked the raw energy Weller holds sacred. This isn't just a quiet disagreement. Weller's dislike for Sting has been remarkably consistent for decades. His most famous and direct takedown of Sting leaves absolutely no room for interpretation. In an interview with Uncut magazine, when asked for his thoughts on the former Police frontman, Weller declared, "Fucking horrible man. Not my cup of tea at all. Fucking rubbish. No edge, no attitude, no nothing." That single quote says it all. No edge, no attitude, no nothing. For Weller, this is the ultimate musical crime. It's a dismissal not just of Sting's sound, but of his very essence as an artist. Weller sees him as the embodiment of a safe, establishment-friendly musician. He sees a performer who became a global superstar by sanding off the rough corners that, in Weller's opinion, are the most important part of the art. The animosity isn't just verbal. There's a famous, or perhaps infamous, story about it getting physical. At the Royal Albert Hall for a charity gig, Weller came face-to-face with a framed photograph of Sting. According to a report in the Daily Mirror, Weller's reaction wasn't quiet disapproval. He reportedly marched straight up to the photo, coughed up as much phlegm as he could muster and planted it plumb in the middle of the Police frontman's head. As he walked away, he allegedly muttered, "Fucking twat." This act, if true, demonstrates the depth of Weller's contempt more than any interview. It's a gesture of pure, unadulterated disrespect, rooted in a fundamental clash of values. Weller has always positioned himself as an outsider kicking against the establishment. Sting, with his ventures into jazz, world music, acting, and his well-publicized life as a global celebrity, has become, in Weller's eyes, the very thing he always fought against. It's a culture war fought in the pages of music magazines. On one side, Weller's unwavering commitment to authentic, street-level rock and roll. On the other, Sting, an artist exploring complex musical arrangements and philosophical lyrics. It's easy to imagine Weller reading about Sting's inspirations and just scoffing, and what about Sting? He's rarely, if ever, engaged directly with Weller's attacks. He seems to operate in a totally different sphere, unconcerned with the barbs thrown his way. In a 1996 interview, when asked if he was jealous of Weller's credibility, Sting just laughed it off, saying, "No, Paul Weller stuck to his guns and there he is, back again. It's great. Good luck to him. I'm not jealous. This calm, detached response probably only infuriates Weller more. It's the response of a man who feels he has nothing to prove, which is the complete opposite of Weller's passionate, combative nature. Ultimately, the Weller-Sting feud is a perfect example of two opposing ideologies in British music. It's the street poet versus the global statesman. It's the belief that music should be a raw, unfiltered expression of rebellion versus the idea that it can be a sophisticated, polished art form. Paul Weller has built his career on the former, and his hatred for Sting is a fierce, lifelong defense of that principle. Next up, a feud that's less about a long-simmering rivalry and more about a single moment of pure, visceral disgust. The target of Weller's most graphically expressed hatred is none other than the multi-platinum-selling balladeer, James Blunt. The setting was the 2006 Brit Awards. Paul Weller was set to receive the prestigious award for outstanding contribution to music. As is tradition, a special performance was being arranged. At first, it was rumored Weller would perform with Oasis. But when the Gallagher brothers pulled out, Brit organizers had to scramble for a replacement. And the name they reportedly proposed was James Blunt. At this point, James Blunt was one of the biggest pop stars on the planet. His song, You're Beautiful, was everywhere, a global mega-hit that sent his album Asterisk back to Bedlam Asterisk to the top of the charts. By all commercial metrics, he was a phenomenon. But in Paul Weller's world, that kind of success isn't a badge of honor. It's a red flag. When the suggestion of a duet reached Weller, his response wasn't a polite, no thanks. It was an explosion. He gave a quote to the Daily Mirror that has since become legendary. "I'd rather eat my own shit than duet with him," Weller declared. Let's just pause and appreciate the raw, unfiltered fury in that statement. It's not just a rejection, it's a statement of profound artistic and personal revulsion. A spokesperson for Weller's record label put it a little more diplomatically, but the message was the same. James isn't exactly the coolest singer around at the moment, he's the last person Paul would sing with. The proposed duet was a collision of two completely different universes. Weller, the mod father, the icon of cool. And James Blunt, the former army officer turned sensitive singer-songwriter, whose music was seen by critics as bland and ubiquitous. For Weller, just suggesting they share a stage was an insult to everything he stood for. It was a potential watering down of his legacy, a forced marriage between authenticity and what he saw as the peak of manufactured pop. So what is it about James Blunt that provokes such a powerful reaction? It goes back to Weller's core values. He came from the punk movement, which sought to tear down the bloated, self-indulgent rock establishment. For Weller, music has to have a purpose, an anger, a truth. He likely sees an artist like James Blunt as representing a new form of that establishment, a corporate, focus group sound designed for mass consumption, with no real danger or substance. James Blunt, to his credit, has always handled the hate with a lot of self-deprecating humor. When asked about Weller's infamous quote, Blunt was typically nonchalant, initially telling reporters, "I was never asked to do a duet with Paul Weller. So I don't know why he said that. I don't care." However, the story took an interesting turn. A year later, Blunt claimed that he had actually spoken to Weller about the incident and that Weller denied ever making the quote, saying he was misquoted. Whether this is true, or just Blunt's way of trying to defuse one of the most famous insults in modern music, is unclear. Given Weller's history of being outspoken, it seems more likely the original quote was 100% genuine. The "eat my own shit" quote has had a long life, often repeated as the gold standard of musical put-downs. It perfectly illustrates the cultural gap in British music. On one side are artists like Weller, who see themselves as gatekeepers of integrity. On the other are artists like Blunt, who achieve phenomenal success by appealing to a mainstream audience that doesn't care about subcultural credibility. For the mod father, the idea of a duet wasn't just a bad suggestion, it was sacrilege. Paul Weller's opinions are as raw as they come, and we're only just getting started. If you're enjoying this look into the feuds of the Mod Father, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We post deep dives into rock history and the most explosive rivalries every week. Now, which feud has shocked you the most so far? Weller's long-standing hatred for Sting, or his visceral takedown of James Blunt? Let us know in the comments below, and let's get back to the final name on Weller's hit list. Our final subject is maybe the most interesting, as it represents not just a clash of musical styles, but a clash of entire subcultures. The man in question is the iconic, lipstick-wearing frontman of The Cure, Robert Smith. This feud runs deep, all the way back to the early 1980s. When punk exploded, bands like The Jam were at the forefront. But as that initial blast faded, the scene splintered. From its ashes rose movements like the Mod Revival, championed by Weller, and the darker, more introspective sounds of goth, with The Cure as one of its leading lights. These weren't just different genres, they were different tribes. The Mods, with their sharp suits and obsession with 60s R&B, were a specific, grounded, and often aggressive youth culture. The Goths, with their black clothes, big hair, and melancholic outlook, represented a different kind of rebellion, one that was more artistic and internal. Paul Weller and Robert Smith were the figureheads of these opposing factions, and their mutual dislike seems to have started from this fundamental difference. The first real public shot was fired by Robert Smith in a 1985 interview. He took a direct swipe at Weller, saying of people who think they're socially aware, that you'd have to be particularly stupid to believe someone like Paul Weller. That was a direct attack on Weller's credibility and the very foundation of his songwriting. To have his social commentary dismissed like that would not have sat well with him. For decades, the animosity was mostly a Cold War. But in November 2022, it erupted. In an interview for a Record Collector magazine special, a journalist mentioned that a new Noel Gallagher song sounded a bit like The Cure's classic, A Forest. Weller's reaction was pure venom. The magazine described his response as a mix of incredulity and revulsion. First, he snarled, "Really? I can't fucking stand them." But he was just getting started. He launched into a shocking personal attack on Robert Smith himself. "Fucking fat cunt, with his lipstick and all that bollocks. He is my age as well, isn't he?" Weller raged. "He's a fucking knob-end, man. I don't like him. There you go. There's someone I wouldn't work with. I'd fucking slap him, or something." The brutality of the language is breathtaking. This wasn't a critique of The Cure's music, it was a deeply personal rejection of Robert Smith as a person. Weller's reference to Smith's age, his weight, and his signature lipstick reveals the core of the issue. Weller sees Smith's is androgynous, messy, and dramatic. It's a fundamental culture clash. There's another layer to this feud that adds a nice touch of irony. Back in 2004, Robert Smith revealed in a Rolling Stone interview that The Cure's debut album was recorded on the sly. He said, "The Jam were recording their album during the day, and we used to sneak in at night and use their equipment to record our album. We just borrowed tape and stuff." The idea that The Cure's sound was born using the Jam's gear is a fascinating footnote to their rivalry. Following Weller's 2022 outburst, The Cure's camp offered a masterclass in subtle shade. Robert Smith himself said nothing. But his longtime keyboardist, Roger O'Donnell, took to Twitter with a perfectly aimed response. He wrote, "I've always thought, as Spike Milligan said, people who live in glass houses should pull the blinds down before removing their trousers. Mr. Weller?" It was a sophisticated jab, implying Weller wasn't exactly in a position to be throwing such stones. This feud is arguably the most revealing of the three. Weller's hatred for Sting is about a perceived lack of edge. His hatred for James Blunt is about a perceived lack of authenticity. But his hatred for Robert Smith is about a fundamental opposition of identity. It's mod versus goth. For Paul Weller, Robert Smith and The Cure are the enemy tribe, and his words leave no doubt which side he's on: Sting, James Blunt, and Robert Smith. Three wildly different artists, all united by one thing: they've all been on the receiving end of Paul Weller's unfiltered wrath. So what drives this? It's more than just a grumpy musician slagging off his peers. Weller's feuds are a window into his soul, a fierce and public defense of his artistic code. This is a man who came of age during punk, a movement that promised to tear down the walls of pretension and phoniness in music. He has carried that torch his entire life. Sting, he sees the polished, corporate rock star who lost his edge. In James Blunt, he sees the commercialization of music, a product so bland it stands for nothing. And in Robert Smith, he sees a rival tribe, an artistic philosophy so opposite to his own that he finds it ridiculous. Some might call it arrogance. Others might call it bitterness. But for Paul Weller, it's a matter of principle. His career has been a constant search for new sounds, always guided by that same North Star: authenticity. He refuses to sell out, refuses to reform the jam for a payday, and refuses to stay silent when he sees something he believes is damaging the soul of music. His brutal honesty is as much a part of his legacy as A Town Called Malice or Wildwood. He is the mod father, the sharp-suited guardian of a certain kind of cool, and he will never apologize for it. But now we have to ask, whose side are you on? Is Weller a refreshing voice of honesty in a sanitized industry, or is he just a grumpy old man who needs to lighten up? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching this deep dive into the feuds of Paul Weller. If you want more stories about the rivalries that shaped music history, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We have new videos dropping every week exploring the legends of rock and pop. Until next time, keep listening.